Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeremy Spoor. I'm the Associate Director of ISSS, and I want to welcome you all to our fall J1 Exchange Visitor Workshop. I'm joined today by my colleague, Irene Anthony. So go ahead, Irene, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Irene Anthony. I'm a senior international student and scholar coordinator, and I work predominantly with the J1 programs, both students and scholars.
Yeah, and we don't have too many folks with us today. I see about 16 who are in here. So we're gonna let people be unmuted, and you can feel free. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A and to talk to each other about questions. So I'm going to do the first part, and you can also put questions in the, I don't know, Mike, where would people want to put questions in the chat, or do you have a Q&A going?
We have a Q&A going. I
We have a
think chat
Q&A
for
going.
this session is not turned on.
Okay. Yeah, our colleague Mike Kelty is our kind of jack of all trades at ISSS. He's helping us run this presentation. So, so let's get started. Um, so I'll take us through the first bunch of slides, and then Irene's going to come in. Um, you could put questions in the Q&A, or you can even raise your hand. But we will make sure we leave time at the end to discuss anything you need. Okay, if I can get it to advance the slides. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. So I want to emphasize with everybody that um, folks that we're inviting as J1 Exchange visitors uh, are we're inviting them to Penn as part of a kind of a citizen diplomacy type of a program that was set up by the U.S. State Department back in the early 1960s. And that's kind of the mission or the spirit of an intent of the J1 program. So I want people to think about that. It's really an exchange program between the US and people of other countries for educational and cultural exchange. So we need to think about it as not they're coming here to work for us or work in a lab, and then they're never going back to their country. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that you're coming here as an exchange visitor. You're going to share your knowledge, you're going to gain some knowledge, then you're going to return home to your country and increase the mutual understanding between your country and the United States. That is the purpose of the J1 program. Um, so it's it's meant to be a temporary program. It's controlled by the U.S. Department of State, not directly by immigration. There is an immigration tie-in here, but the program is run by the Department of State. And the database that we use to manage it is called SEVIS, which is the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. That part is overseen by Department of Homeland Security and by the users at ISSS. Most, like my Irene and myself, are users in the SEVIS system, and most of our staff at ISSS use this system to interface between Penn and the federal government and immigration for all of our students and scholars. So we're kind of ISSS is kind of the middleman between the people that on campus versus the U.S. government and immigration, and we use SEVIS to do that. So the various considerations that you want to think about for someone that you want to invite as a J1 is what's their immigration history. Maybe they don't have any, and that's okay too. Have they been here as a J1 before or a student before? And they have to have the right academic credentials to be able to participate in the J program. Generally, it's a minimum of a bachelor's degree, unless they're coming to be a student intern. In that case, they may be enrolled in a bachelor's program in their country. They have to have finances. They need to have the good enough health insurance coverage. They need to adhere to the program objective, which basically means what is the purpose, what is the research that they're coming here to do? Are they coming here to do research in the field of microbiology? Then that's the thing that they have to stick to. They can't switch from microbiology to physics or history or something. They need to stick with the original program objective. And they have to be in valid J1 status before they start whatever they're doing with us. So different schools have different policies. The School of Medicine has quite an extensive policy system for folks that can be visiting scholars at the School of Medicine at Penn. And that's run out of the dean's office. And you need to know your school's internal policies. These are not ISSS policies, and they're not immigration policies. They're internal to Penn. So there are different rules for folks that are coming, whether you're in SAS or Cs or dental or School of Medicine. Remote work is generally not allowed because the State Department has told us that, and all the schools in the U.S. are institutions that sponsor Jays, that the point of being here as a J1 is to engage in the exchange. Okay, meaning that you need to interact with other people, other Americans when you're here, so that you are participating in the exchange. So they need to be, working on Penn's main campus or maybe New Bolton Center, out in Chester County. But in general, it's not to facilitate remote work. Okay, if they've come into the U.S. as a J1 and gotten started at Penn, you got them on payroll, you onboarded them, and then they're going to exit for any extended period of time, that can have serious payroll and tax implications. So that's generally not allowed. We do have scholars must submit an out-of-country e-form if they will be absent from the U.S. for more than 30 days. That's really an immigration rule. The other issue about being out of the U.S. is the payroll and the tax, and that's a Penn institutional problem. And if there's folks are meant to be predominantly in the U.S., hence the exchange. It's not to come in for a week and then go out for a month and then come in for a week and go out for a month. It's meant to be that, you're here for 6 months and maybe you go home to visit your family for a week during that 6 months. That's okay. But think about where these people are located in the world and what they're doing. We really need to know that. J1s cannot be used for staff jobs. Okay, generally like our jobs. I don't know. I think my Penn workday title is like Associate Director C or something like that. And so anybody who's going to have a staff job cannot be a J1. And they cannot also be for tenure track faculty. They can be for visiting faculty to come and teach a class for a semester or a year. That's fine. Also, be very careful of any clinical activities that would apply to School of Medicine, dental medicine, nursing, vet, any of those where you might have patient contact. Vet school, animals count as patients. So you need to be very careful with that. And there can be what's called incidental patient care, like if they're gathering information, or incidental patient contact, I guess. If they're gathering information for research purposes, that's different than providing care. Um, so be aware of the limitations of our J program here at Penn. And there's, of course, quite a bit of documentation required. Things need to be translated into English if they're in different languages. We want to make sure that the funding and the dates match up with the contract or the supporting documentation or the appointment from the department. You want to try to have all those things aligned. If we see conflicting dates or conflicting information, we're going to ask you for more clarification. And they need to be signed by the appropriate person in your department. We allow this to be a little flexible. I think the word on the form is something like the chair or head needs to sign off because some departments are slightly different, but it's got to be somebody who is really the boss of your area, needs to know that these folks are coming. And I'll give you just a little anecdote about that. I had an experience years ago with uh, a certain Penn school and department. I won't name any names, but there were several J1s who were in this department working, in labs, and there was an issue with their funding, and we were having a meeting with that department, and the chair said something like, who authorized all these people? They're not on our budget. And I had the documents, and it was kind of like a courtroom scene. I said, well, Dr. So-and-so, isn't this your signature on the forms? And that chair was very upset, but he'd been signing off on people, but not really knowing what he was signing off on. So we have to collect and you have to help us collect our documentation so that the proper, bosses in the departments know what they're signing up for when you're going to bring a person. And it was, at the time it was very serious, but now it looks a little comical that this chair was very angry, but he was really angry at himself because he had signed off on these J1 docs, and he didn't realize what he was signing off on. So let's see. Minimum funding is still quite low. Hopefully you will be able to, people will have certainly more funding than this. I think this is based on like the federal poverty levels for a person in the city. So that's pretty low to live in Philly for $28,000 a year. Hopefully most of our J's make or at least have funding from some source up to, say, 40, 50,000, 60,000, I don't know, but 28,000 is quite low. If they're postdocs, they have to meet the minimum funding levels across, that are mandated either by NIH funding levels or Penn funding levels. English language proficiency. To carry out this exchange, the exchange visitors need to be conversant in English to be able to understand what they're doing here and to make themselves understood, to interact with the local Americans, to be able to live comfortably and understand everything. We have had a few issues within the past year of scholars who were very much on the borderline of the English language requirements. And unfortunately, we've even had a few that once they got here, they struggled so much with their English that we had to send them back to their country because their level of language skill was not enough to carry out the research that they were trying to do here. They may have been a brilliant scientist, and it's nothing against the person personally, but their English level was not up to snuff. And we did end up sending them back and shortening their J1. So we as ISSS and Penn overall, we really have to take this seriously to make sure that folks meet the English language requirements. Health insurance. There are certain rules and limitations and thresholds that people have to meet to be a J1 scholar. That's for everybody. And this is a government mandate, not from Penn. So they have to have certain coverage to meet minimums. And a lot of if people are going to use their own insurance, they can get exceptions from Penn has kind of subcontracted this out to Garnet Powers. And they're the folks that used to help us run our postdoc insurance policy. We no longer do that, but they help us with our general other visiting scholars to vet their insurance or help provide them with insurance. And unfortunately, we have had some real cases where scholars became ill or they got hit by a car and they needed to have the insurance funding. We had a severe case where a scholar was hit by a car on Walnut or Chestnut, and she was injured very badly. Of course, Penn Medicine is very good. They saved her life, and she recovered, but she ran up some tremendous bills at HUP, and then her insurance coverage did not meet the costs, the bill. So then HUP, it was like Penn was chasing itself for the bill. So then HUP was coming after the Penn department and ISSS to pay this person's medical bill because their insurance payment or their insurance coverage was not enough to cover the bill. So that was one of the reasons that we have contracted with Garnet Powers to make sure that people have sufficient coverage. So I just want to give you a couple of real world examples there that we've had over the years. Let's see, there's also export control. And that is to make sure that sensitive technologies or research is not being sent back to other countries that may not be so friendly to the US. And this is up to the institution, which is us, which is Penn, to help ensure this. And we have an office. There is an office for that at Office of Export Control. And it gives the contact there for Jessica Buchanan. She's very good at her job, and she works with departments and with ISSS to make sure that we're complying with export control limitations. There have been some cases where PIs, professors at various schools have violated export control and been prosecuted by the federal government for doing so. I think there was kind of a famous case at Harvard a few years ago where some professors were prosecuted by the federal government for not complying with export control with foreign nationals from China, which we know we have a lot of here. So we need to make sure that the export control is done correctly. Okay, with that, I'm going to pause here for a minute. Does anybody have any questions about the kind of the background of the program and what does it mean to be a J1? Anything like that? Yeah. So
I do. Thank you, Jeremy, for this explanation. I do have several questions. One is related to the last part of you just said. Export control, what exactly is that? It means that only few countries that we can consider only people from certain country in order to have the access to J1?
no, well, I guess what it means is it's more about what almost we can invite J1s from pretty much any country, okay? But before they come, the PI or the professor that's inviting them has to fill in this kind of survey and attest to the fact that this research is not subject to export control. So the PI has to sign off and say like yes or no to this series of questions, and then they have to sign it as the one who's doing the inviting. So
Let me be, Jenny, a little bit more specific. It means that only country with which United States has a diplomatic relationship, for example, Venezuela is not one of them. Can we invite a citizen of Venezuela with whom
yeah,
that
I
has
think
not?
I
Yeah.
think you can. Yeah. Yeah. It might be difficult for them to get a visa and to get here,
Exactly.
but that's a different thing. That's not export control. Export control is about the topic of the research.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Second question, Jeremy. When and if the individual is given a J1 visa from Penn, can the individual work or perform for lecture or talk with other institutions within the United States?
They can. And on a kind of there's a process where it's called help me out here, Irene. I'm blanking.
Occasional lecture
Thank you.
consultation. There's a
So,
form in IPEN that the scholar can complete, an e-form notification that's submitted to us. And as long as there's a form also that the PI would have to attach confirming that the activity is in supports the J1 program objective, we can entertain, allowing it. But the important thing to remember, it's like a one-time event. It can't be like they're going to teach for a semester at Drexel, a class. It's like, you're going to Harvard for a day or two to lecture on your topic, your point of J1 activity. You're going to go there for a day or two to lecture and then come back. It's not like you're going to be at Drexel every Monday night for a semester teaching a course. That's something that would not be something we would be able to support as an occasional lecture or consultation.
it's nice to see you, Irene. Remember you, and
Yep.
we should talk Italian too. I know the Italians. But thank you for that explanation. So because I wanted to clarify within myself that sometimes they need like different J1 from different. But so it's possible for occasional visit to do that.
As long as it has to be vetted by our office before because once someone does it without our authorization, then that can be construed as unauthorized employment. So anything has to be vetted and approved by us prior to the activity taking place. That's very important.
Thank you. My other question is about the financial support, Jeremy. So this financial support, you mentioned the limit of 28,000, a few dollars there. The financial support must be just the own financial support, or can be eventually also stipend or a salary that we pay.
It can be a combination.
Okay.
It could be half from the scholar and half from Penn, or it could be from a third party. Could be some third party. It could be a combination of funding
Okay.
to meet the minimum. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so it's not just the individual own finance, so it's can be a
Right.
combination of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Combination is fine.
My final question, I apologize for so many questions. What you need to be like, to check with your school about the policy. I am in the college or in the School of Art and Sciences. What does it mean? What exactly you mean with that?
I would say, sorry.
Go ahead, Irene. Go ahead.
So there is not like a general Penn policy for the J1 or whatever visa?
Yeah. Each school has slightly different requirements. So for example, the college requires a digital dean's approval. That's what is specific to the college. That is not required for, say, Annenberg, but that is a dean's electronic sign off is required for the college.
Oh, got it. Okay. So, and of course, if I ask this question to my school, they will eventually able to answer to me. So, what a specific point. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. That's my question at the moment.
Okay.
All right, great. Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. We wish there was an overarching policy for all of Penn,
Make life easier.
but it would be much easier for all of us. But
For us too.
yeah, but as you know, Penn likes to do everything in a decentralized manner. So, SAS is different than engineering, is different than Wharton, is different than everybody else. So it's very honestly it's very challenging for ISSS because we're the ones doing all the J's, but they may be dispersed among the 12 schools, and everybody wants to have the separate policy. So that's our challenge. So
Hi, hello, good afternoon. I have two questions, and one is regarding the export control portion. So I know that there's going to be a new e-form with the export control. I may have missed this, but when will that go into effect? And would you happen to know if I can get like a preview of it so I can bring it back to my boss and we can discuss how we're gonna inform the PIs inviting new J1s?
yeah, Irene, have you been
I,
working on Amanda with this, I imagine?
I think it's part of Trilby.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, I don't have more information than that. It's going to be incorporated into a new system that we're having, but I don't know what the specific questions are that are posed during that part. Assuming it's not going to be different, but I'm not 100% sure, honestly.
So
Yeah, and
I mean, I guess because like the PI is gonna have to sign off on it. So, is this something are they gonna have to sign off on it, or is it just gonna be like the same, or we do the screening ourselves, like the department representative?
I
I'm
I
not,
don't yeah, I don't know how it's gonna physically work, whether it's gonna be like you sign and upload or the PI signs and then you upload the PDFs. Or I think though our new system that is not we're starting to shift to, but it's not it will take probably a year
Oh, okay.
to shift. It's gonna be some time till we shift over to it. We're gonna have a new Scholar database, which is similar to IPEN, but it's not the same as IPEN, and it's going to have some more built-in things. So I imagine it will have probably an e-form rather than uploading PDFs. But
Okay.
it will be something that like the PI might have to access and then
Oh,
sign electronically or something like that.
oh no. Okay, fair enough. And then
Yeah.
my other question would be, I know that uh, as part of the J1, you're not supposed to do work from home for a majority of the time. Is it like you can't do any work from home? Like for example, if you wanted to work from home once a week, is that okay? Do you
that's
have?
fine. Yeah. The maximum you can work from home is 2 days a week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm. But, again, as Jeremy mentioned, you can't work full-time remotely. You can't be, overseas working full-time remotely. And even, the regs speak to, being predominantly present on the university campus. So, we had a situation where someone traveled for 3 weeks, came back for a week, traveled for 2 weeks, came back for a week. And so it was always under that 30-day period, but aggregate, he was only in the United States 50% of the time, which is not, something that we could really authorize. So we ended up having to shorten his sponsorship, and they're working out, different paths that he can pursue. But, as Jeremy said from the outset, the J1 program is really a cultural educational exchange visa. So it's whereas people might think of it, oh yeah, it gets me into the United States and I can do whatever I want to, as far as working, it is a public diplomacy initiative. So whether participants know it or not, they are like ambassadors, so to speak. They're teaching Americans something about their home country, and They're also learning something about the American culture. That, in essence, is what the J1 program was truly created and designed for. And that is what the Department of State is really asking us as sponsors to make sure we're upholding that that spirit and intent of the program.
Right. And then if they are working from home, is this something that we would have to report to you, or is this something like this is information that you don't necessarily need?
You can, when you're doing the application in the e-form, there's an alternative site. You can indicate their home address there, and we can add that then in their CVIS record as an alternative site of activity.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we know that some, you know, some of us, like right now, we work from home 2 days a week. Some different Penn departments work 1 day a week. It varies a little bit, so that is okay. But for J1 scholars, it's the max of 2 days a week from their apartment, I guess.
Okay. So I will pick up from here. Are there any more questions? No? Okay. We'll still have time at the end to answer some more. So within the Department of State's designation to the University of Pennsylvania, they have authorized us for different categories of the J1 program. And if you think about the J1 program, it's overseen by the Department of State, as Jeremy mentioned, and then they in turn designate different sponsors within the United States to manage the J1 program on the ground, so to speak. So most universities in the United States have been designated as a J1 sponsor by the Department of State. Within the J1 program, there are 15 categories. So you can have camp counselor, au pair, K through 12 student. The Department of State has designated these specific categories to the University of Pennsylvania, meaning that University of Pennsylvania can only sponsor individuals, J1 exchange visitors, in these particular categories. And they in turn are then we adhere to the regulations, the federal regulations, in managing them as far as the documentation that's required and just the regulations that each of the exchange visitors have to follow in order to maintain their status to remain in the United States in that particular category. Okay, next slide. All right, so the most popular visa category that we have designation for and that we sponsor J1s for is the J1 professor or research scholar. Those are actually two separate categories. So research scholars are the predominant category. And as it says, that's an explanation of what a research scholar is. And basically it's to engage in teaching, research teaching, observing, consulting, in connection with a research project and lecturing. So really that's why postdocs are very popular in the J1 research scholar category, because that's what they're doing, right? They're conducting research on their program objective. And also as a J1 research scholar, you can do some incidental lecturing. Again, vet it through our office first to make sure it's okay. And vice versa, professors, if you're here as a J1 professor, you can also do some research. The minimum stay as a research scholar is 3 weeks, and the J1 regulations allow someone to stay up to a maximum of 5 years in that particular visa category, that research category. We also sponsor a fair number of J1 short-term scholars, which, as it mentions in the first bullet, is a maximum stay of 6 months. So that's for someone to come in. They might be teaching a class one semester. They might have a very month-long, 2-month-long project that they want to work on. As the second bullet mentions, they're going to be lecturing, observing, consulting, or participating in any workshop, conferences, educational, professional activities. They can be here for 1 day to 6 months as a J1 short-term scholar. The important thing to remember about J1 short-term scholars, though, is it's 6 months. That's it. We had an incident where someone was like, "Oh, but we want to stay longer than 6 months." You cannot stay longer as a J1 short-term scholar, and it should not be presumed that you can then change automatically from a J1 short-term scholar to a J1 research scholar. Again, the whole premise behind the J1 program is by the Department of State, you come in, you do your program activity, but then you go back home. It's all about returning home. So the Department of State wants to see people go home, not turn around and come back in under a different visa category of the J1 program. So that's why it's we have to do a lot of research depending on, what their long-term plans are. Nicola, you had a
Yes,
question?
yes, Irene. So that was my question about the length. So it means that if we want to have the scholar coming back, he needs to go back to his country, and we need to start a new proceeding for another J1 short-term scholar.
Well, if you come back as a J1, you can't do two back-to-back J1 short-term scholars because that kind of circumvents the purpose of the J1 program, unless they are coming back to do something completely different. But it can't be, you're here to do research. I'm here for 6 months, and you're doing research in a particular area, and then you want to, take a month off and then come back and for another 6 month stint as a short-term scholar. That would not be an appropriate use of the J1 short-term scholar. J1 short-term scholar is, if you're here for a couple months, 2-3 months, teach a class, then you go home for a year, want to teach another class the following, year, things like that. The program objective, and this is regulatory, this is in the federal regulations, the program objective has to be different. You can't be, coming in under one mission, taking a quick break, turning around and getting another 6 month stint really to continue what you were doing previously. Again, that would be construed as a circumvention of the J1 program.
Irene, can I ask a rhetorical/romantic
Sure.
question?
Mhm.
What about if a J1 scholar fell in love with an American citizen during the stay of his or her or their in America? In order for to get a fiancé visa or eventually apply for marriage, etc. So he still needs, or she still, or they still need to go back to their country because they enter with a J1.
It varies. This gets a little convoluted, and it's something that we'd have to, look at on an individual basis. If someone is subject to something called the 2-year home residency requirement, then they are ineligible to change status within the United States. So they would have to depart and apply for a different visa. But honestly, in that situation, I would have them talk to an immigration attorney because they might not be eligible for like a fiance visa either. So it gets a little tricky. So personal situations like that, that's not really our expertise in, personal immigration or family immigration. So most likely we would have them consult with an immigration attorney about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, and just as I just mentioned, the J1 short-term scholar is really not to be used for the same activity, depart and come back in, or multiple stays in a row, we've had J1 research scholars who have maxed out on their 5 years, but need, some more time just to finish up their project. And they've asked, well, can I depart and come back in on a short-term, J1 short-term, different category? No, because the program intention is the same. And again, this is all recorded in the SEVIS system, the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. So this is a government database. So they can pick up on, what Penn is doing. So if they see some red flags, they will call us on it. So that's why we have to be very careful in what we allow and disallow. Okay, J1 student intern, it's a little bit different. The short-term scholar, research scholar, at a minimum, they have to have a bachelor's degree and have experience in the field for which they're coming to do their research in. J1 student intern's a little bit different. They can be pursuing a bachelor's degree or any degree for that matter, but they have to be currently enrolled in pursuing that degree at their home institution. that is outside of the US. It also has to be with the intent that they're going back home after their internship to resume their studies in order to graduate from their home institution. And that this internship is really integral to their graduation from that home institution. And so again, the last bullet, as it mentions, is really for the internship experience. It's not to be construed as an employment visa or to provide services to Penn. It's really to the benefit of the student to enhance their educational information and knowledge about their subject that they're studying. And again, time limitations, 12 months max for each degree level. And there is something called, we call it the SIPA, which is it's on our, further information is about it on our website, but basically it has to be signed off by Penn, and it has to be signed off by the home institution, confirming that there is an official exchange going on. And it's really used mostly for undergraduates who are pursuing their bachelor's degree or their undergraduate degree in their home country. Usually, if someone's already got their bachelor's degree, they're going to come in on a J1 research scholar. So we mostly see J1 student interns for undergraduates who are pursuing an internship and are going to go back home to finish their degree. Okay, so this gets a little confusing. The 24-month bar, there's something called the 24-month bar, the 12-month bar, and the 2-year home residency requirement. Suffice to say, when you come in on a J1, or even before you come into the US on a J1, regardless of the category, we as a program sponsor really have to look at your previous immigration history, especially if you had any J time within the last year or two, because that can have a bearing on whether we would be able to sponsor you as a J1 immediately. So it's kind of, I use the analogy, just as a doctor would not prescribe a medication without, doing an exam to see what your medical history is. We cannot entertain J1 sponsorship without, among other things, looking at what the applicant's immigration history has been. I'm not going to get too far down in the weeds because it can get very confusing very quickly. And this is just an example. Suffice to say, if someone is here this is an important thing to remember, if someone's here as a J1 research scholar in that category, and remember what I said at the outset, you can remain as long as there's, Penn support and funding, you can stay up to a maximum of 5 years. But let's say someone's here for 2 years. They've decided they've got a job back home, or for whatever reason, they finish up at Penn, complete their J1 program after 2 years, and go back home. They are precluded by regulation to come back as another J1 research scholar or professor in either of those categories for 24 months. And again, the impetus behind this is for individuals really to go back home and share with their fellow countrymen what they learned about from the United States. They don't want people to do back-to-back J1 programs or, 5 years max, depart for a weekend and come back for another 5 years. It really is to guard against that. Same thing with the 12-month bar. Suffice to say, it's just if you've had a prior J1 status, we have to look at that because it might preclude you from coming back immediately in a particular J1 category. Okay, so we are at the point for the application process, and there's the link on our website for that. Next slide, Jeremy. There we go. So basically how it works is the J1 application has to be initiated by the department. The departmental representative has access to IPEN. They submit the application. Sometimes the scholars will say, well, how do I start? It's like, well, you don't start. The department starts because you're the ones that are going to be hosting this individual. We ask that someone, if you're submitting an application, start at least 3 to 4 months prior to when you expect this person to arrive on campus, because there's lag time here in our office while we review the application. But also, once we've issued this document called the DS 2019 form and the person's outside the United States, they have to use it to apply for a visa at a US consulate. And visa times processing at US consulates can be kind of dicey as far as the length of time. Some are fairly quick, others can take several weeks, if not months, to secure the J visa, and they cannot, the individual cannot enter in J1 status until they've been issued that visa by the US consulate. But the first step is that, the application is submitted to our office by the department with all supporting documentation. If we review it, once we review it and everything is fine, we will issue this DS 2019 form, a certificate for eligibility for a J1 exchange visitor. We will email it. It's now, as of 2 years, about a year and a half ago, we can now email it with a digital signature to both the J1 applicant and the BA. So the BA is aware of it. And then the link that we send them, the email information we send them, gives them instructions on how they can proceed with applying for a J1 visa at a US consulate. Keep in mind, 2 country citizenships are not required to have visas. Those are Canadian citizens and citizens from, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Bermuda? It's Bermuda or the Bahamas. I can't remember which one.
It's Bermuda. It's
Bermuda.
Bermuda.
Okay.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
was saying Bermuda,
Sure.
Bermuda. I was muted.
But they still would need this DS 2019 form. They can leave out the part of having to go to the consulate. Again, Canada and Bermuda are the only 2 exceptions. Everyone else is going to need to go, once they get that DS 2018, to make an appointment at the US consulate, apply for a J visa, and enter the United States with that DS 2018 and their passport containing the J visa as J1 exchange visitors.
And we have very few Bermudians. I mean, there's hardly any of them to begin with, and we have maybe 1 or 2 over my many years at Penn. It's very rare, and they're usually undergrads. So
Okay. And just some practical issues, as I mentioned, we send once the DS 2018 form has been issued by our office, we send it by email. If you're still having issues, just reach out to us and with a screenshot of the error that you're seeing, and we can assist. J1 scholar transfers. So these are individuals who are currently in the United States as a J1 research scholar and are looking to transfer their J1 program to Penn. So let's say they're at Harvard, they're going to be transferring from the Harvard sponsorship to UPenn sponsorship as a J1. So there's information in eForm 2 that the scholar completes saying, who's your current international advisor at Harvard or your home institution, and that sets in motion the transfer process. So it's kind of built in. If you have any J1 scholars who are resigning early or, going back home for whatever reason, they're going to be ending their time at Penn, please, as the departmental representative, log into iPenn. You can edit their record to shorten it. And then once I receive notification for that, I will issue them them meaning the exchange visitor, an amended DS 2019 form to reflect their new shortened end date. And I'll email that to them. Okay, so once the visa process, once we've issued the DS 2019 form, instructions are sent by email along with the DS 2018 form to the scholar. The instructions include them having to pay a $220 CVIS fee online to the Department of Homeland Security. They then schedule an appointment at a US consulate for the J1 visa interview. They are allowed to, by regulation, to enter the United States 30 days prior to the start date on their DS 2019 form. That's for them to get settled, get arranged, and living arrangements, things of that nature. And then once that date is met on their DS 2019 form, that's when they can start their activity at Penn. If there are any delays in visa processing at the U.S. consulate, just notify our office. There's again an e-form in IPEN that is can be used to notify us of late arrivals. And it just said it. So there are, we do have the late arrival form. We can amend to amend the dates on the DS 2019 form so that it's like kicked further into the future. So if there's an emergency where a scholar needs to get here yesterday, each consulate does have its emergency appointment schedule or process. So they would need to, each scholar would need to reach out to the local consulate to find out or review their website. Usually that doesn't happen too often. It's more students where that happens, not so much scholars. And this is just an example of what a visa looks like. We've removed all the pertinent information. The photograph is what the big box is on the left. We put it in there just because a lot of times people will think once their visa expires, they can no longer be present in the United States. And remember, the visa is only what allows you to enter the United States in a particular visa classification, right? In this case, a J1. Once you're here, your visa can expire. What's more important while you're physically in the United States is to have a valid DS 2019 form with a future end date, something called an I-94 form, which is an arrival record showing you've entered the United States in J1 visa status, and you're participating full-time in the activity for which J1 sponsorship was granted or authorized by the University of Pennsylvania. So this little document that's issued by the U.S. consulate and placed in a passport, it's like a ticket to an amusement park. You use it to enter the United States. Once you're here, it can expire because you're already here. It's only used for entry to the United States. Just some reminders. And again, all this information is communicated in that email to the J1 scholar when we're sending them the DS 2019 form. Once they arrive or even pre-arrival, there's an online orientation or tutorial that they have to sign into in IPEN to review. They review it. There's a check-in process where they upload copies of their visa, their I-94 form. And then once we've reviewed it here in our office, we will then validate their CVIS records. So before they come in, and even once they've just arrived, the CVIS record will say initial. Once we reviewed the documentation and made sure that they've arrived here as a J1, we will change that from initial to active, their CVIS record. And so everything is done virtually now, so they don't have to come in person to the office any longer. So it's a completely online process now. One thing, this probably should have been to the other section, but there is something called the 2-year home residency requirement, which basically precludes a J1 from obtaining certain other visa classifications, such as an H visa, K visa, L visa, or US green card until they've gone home for 2 years or received a waiver of that requirement. Again, this is where it gets confusing. Is this different from the 24-month bar? Those are two separate things. So whereas all J1s have a 24-month bar that can be applicable to them, not all J1s are subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. Important thing to remember about the 2-year home residency requirement is this. If a J1 applies for and receives a waiver of that 2-year home residency obligation from the Department of State, then we as a program sponsor by law can no longer extend their sponsorship. We can no longer extend their DS 2019 form. So if you get wind of any of your J1s applying for a waiver, you might want to tap them on the shoulder and have them contact us first, because sometimes it's done prematurely. Someone might arrive in the United States, they've got 1 year of sponsorship, and they're applying for a waiver. Well, you've got, 4 more years. You got up to 5 years as a J1 research scholar. So they're kind of cutting off their nose in a way, or pinning themselves into a corner. If they get a waiver, we can no longer extend them, nor can they transfer to another program. So their time as a J is done. So suffice to say, that's the only thing that you have to really remember. Waivers, get wind of it, contact us. Jeremy, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to point out that sometimes new J1 scholars or postdocs think they're really smart, and they are really smart, but they're trying to get their H1B like tomorrow. I want my H1B, I want my H1B. So they come in, just as Irene said, they come in as a J, and they've been here. I had this discussion with somebody maybe in the winter or spring. She came in January 1st as a J. She's subject to 2-year home residency. She turned around, applied for a waiver within 2 months. And then she said, well, then my department will do an H for me because they can't extend me. Because once I get a waiver, I have to be an H. But that is totally circumventing everything that we're trying to do here. And it ended up that the department said, no, we planned for you to be a postdoc for 3, 4, 5 years as a J. So no, we're not doing an H for you. And she was, she painted herself into a corner. She was stuck. Then she was all very angry with us, but it was like, no, she completely jumped the gun on the whole, I want a waiver and I want an H1B. So be very wary of that. If they come as a J, you're supposed to be a J for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then if you get promoted to be a research associate or a senior research investigator, then we do an H for you. So that's my kind of lesson for that.
I just wanted to
Thank
step
you.
in really quick and remind everybody about the time. It's almost end of our session.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. Irene, when do you recommend to start the proceeding for the application? Usually we invite the scholars for the semester. So you recommend to start, for example, for the fall in the summer.
Yeah. If they're starting late August, I would, submit it sometime probably in late May, because that'll
Okay.
give us time to review it and also time for them to get the visa processing done.
So is it safe to say like 1 month before?
No, I would
Well,
do again, if you really want to be safe, again, it depends on the country too, right?
Okay.
Iranians can take many, many months.
All right.
So, I mean, worst case scenario is that you do it too early. You do it like if someone's coming in late August to start teaching or whatnot, submit it by, mid to late May or early June. We get it done within a month. And if everything's in order, that will still give them time, at the US consulate. Summertime at consulates can be a little bit busy because there are a lot of student applications too.
Okay, maybe it's a good idea before we start, maybe to check with you to say, depending on the country, so you can give an idea about the the time frame.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
my-
it's also not just about the country, it's like the conditions at that particular consulate. There might be factors that, staff shortages. I might not know like specific nuances of each consulate, but I can tell you Iranians take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
or a lot longer. Iranians
Yeah.
especially. But I would plan, Nicola, I would plan, just figure you really want to have the completed application into IPEN probably 90 days in advance of
Thank
when
you.
you want them to show up here. Figure like 90 days out.
Yeah.
Um,
My second question is, where are you located now? I used to be at the International House, no longer, and then you moved to Leonard Court. Where are you now physically?
in
There's an
St.
outfit.
Leonard's Court still.
Oh, still
Uh,
there. Okay.
Yeah, we're at St. Leonard's, but supposedly it looks like it's going to happen. We're going to move to that new building that's being built at 40th and Walnut, where the McDonald's used to be.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna move to that new building, hopefully for the spring semester. So we're supposed to be moving within the next 2 months.
Thank you.
Jeremy, I just want to interject. My battery's dying.
Oh,
So I just wanted to, I'm going to actually go get Jean's charger. So I'm sorry.
okay,
Can you take over
okay.
real quick?
Yeah, I can take over. Sure,
Okay, thank you.
sure, no problem. Um, I'll just keep going here for everybody because we're running out of time. But these are all great questions today. So this is a snip of what a DS 2019 looks like, where they have checked the boxes for a person being subject to 212E, which is the regulation
I'm back.
for. Okay, that was quick. Which is
He
the
just handed it to me.
regulation for the 2-year home residency requirement. So in those little checkbox there, it says subject to 2-year residency requirement based on government funding or exchange visitor skills list. So this person is subject, and that's pretty much anybody from China or India, which is the vast majority of our folks. They're all going to be subject automatically because of both of these reasons. So that's why our folks from China and India love to just get an H-1B right away. But that it doesn't mean we have to give it to them or we need to give it to them at all. They can be a J. So, okay, I'll throw it back to Irene.
Okay. This is like beating a dead horse to death with the 24-month bar, 2-year home residency requirement. Again, it gets very complicated. And even if you've been in this field, it can be confusing. So suffice to say, anyone coming in on a J, just be a little bit wary that their previous immigration history as a J, and their plans for future sponsorship can be affected. So just take that into consideration. And then just finally, some important things that we as a program sponsor have to be aware of for all our J1s. Again, this is J1 federal regulations. If they're withdrawing from their program early, we need to know that. Otherwise, we're not going to shorten their sponsorship and we're going to have an active CVIS record for someone that's no longer at Penn, which is a problem. So we have to be notified of any early departures or withdrawals from their program. If they're going to be traveling overseas for more than 30 days, there is in IPEN a notification. It's called out of US or out of country notification that the J1 themselves can complete. They have to notify us about any changes in their US address or their phone number or email or site of activity. All those things we have to be apprised of so that we can then update the CVIS system. If there are any J2s that are here with them in the United States and they've divorced or they've decided they want to go back home full time, we need to be notified of that. And finally, any incident or allegation, such as a hospitalization, legal issues, anything that, and per the regs, could bring notoriety or disrepute to the J1 program has to be reported to us. So if there are any, where I used to work, there were, DUIs, DWIs. There was unfortunately deaths that occurred of the J1 exchange visitors or their sponsors or their spouses. So anything, that is, and if you're not sure, let us know and we can let you know if that is something we need to be notified about. And then verification reminders, this is done every 6 months, and we basically ask the BA to go through IPEN and just verify that the individuals are in fact here on campus doing what they're supposed to be doing. This is also for H's as well. And it's our way to ensure and say to the government, yes, we've gotten verification that not only are the individuals entered the United States as J1s, but they're here on campus doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it's important that the BAs, department reps, follow up and do that in a timely fashion. And we talked about this a little bit earlier about the occasional lectures or consultations. So again, this is something that the applicant, the J1, would initiate in their IPEN. We would review it. Has to happen prior to the activity so that we can review it. If we authorize it, we'll send them notification that it's been authorized. But once an activity is done, it can't be done retroactively. We can't approve it retroactively. And again, this could have an impact on their visa status because they would be, could be deemed to be working without authorization. So that could be a problem. So again, anything that happens, let us know before it happens. And then just extensions, we send out notification reminders to both the department and the individual to make sure to start the process well in advance before their current visa status expires, visa status being what's indicated on their DS 2019 form. It's very important, especially as we get close to the end of the year. Some might have a December 31st, 2024 end date on their DS 2019 form. Our office is going to be closed like that last week leading up to New Year's. So just make sure you're checking, getting those applications in now. As soon as an appointment letter can be done, doesn't hurt to get the extension in to our office now if that's been taken care of, so we can get that extension taken care of well before their expiration date. Mentioned this a little bit previously about the J1 if they're currently in the United States and another J1 under another J1's program sponsorship, as long as they are maintaining their status, they're going to be participating in the same program activity, meaning, they were doing cell biology at MIT or wherever, and they're going to be doing cell biology here. That's something we could entertain. There cannot be gaps in sponsorship. So if someone's last day at MIT is October 31st, their start date here at Penn has to be November 1st. There can't be a gap. Any, inactive J1 status, any absences need to be notified by to Penn's to ISSS so we can review it. And again, there's a J1 Scholar Notice of Absence e-form in IPEN. And then, there might be FML related absences. That's something we would have to review on an individual case by case basis. And the final bullet, just make sure everyone understands you as a J1, you cannot be here without performing those activities for which you received J1 sponsorship. That's very important. That's your whole crux of being here. And then finally, starting to lose my voice, dependents who are in J2 status, we can sponsor them. Again, in IPEN, there's an e-form that the applicant can submit, the J1 can submit. We would need, copy of the J2 dependent's passport and their financial support. For a spouse, it's $500 per month. For a child, it's $334 per month for each child. And then there's further information on our website about that, what some of the benefits are for a J2. They can apply for employment authorization, but their whole crux of being in the United States as a J2 is tied to the J1. So they're not here independently. They're here based on, they're going to be living with the J1. They're a spouse or unmarried child under the age of 21 are the two classifications for J2 as well. So parents, uncles, cousins do not qualify. And then finally, departure from the United States. They are allowed a 30-day grace period after completing their program to depart the United States. During that time, they're not really affiliated with the university any longer, but it's just time for them to pack up, get their belongings together to depart the United States. And that is it. Sorry we went over by like 15 minutes. Any questions? And yeah, make sure you take a snapshot of the QR code and let us know how we did. But are there any questions? Again, apologies for taking so long. No. Okay. Jeremy, any last words of wisdom?
No, I really don't have anything at this time. If anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to ask. If not, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Irene or myself or Tracy or Charmaine at ISSS about your J1 questions or applications. So we're here and we're ready to help you.